This episode is for the writer who wants to actually finish their memoir manuscript. This episode is also part of a 4-part series that I'm running here on the podcast that I'm calling the 12-month memoir. Over the holidays, I was thinking about you and what you might want heading into the new year, and what came through was a month-by-month plan for how to use your time, energy, and money as a memoir writer so that by the end of 12 months, you will have a finished memoir draft in hand, ready to move into publication. You can catch up on part 1 back in episode 113. Today, we're getting into part 2. Let's get started.
You are listening to the Memoir Method podcast, the place for writers, readers, and anyone who appreciates the collective power of our stories. In this podcast, we explore the impact of memoir alongside an examination of writing techniques and strategies used in the genre. Whether you are a writer looking for inspiration and guidance or a passionate reader seeking meaningful connections through shared experiences, the Memoir Method podcast is your go-to conversation spot. I'm your host, Charlotte, editor, writer, and the heart behind Charlotte Writes. Let's get started.
Let's do a quick recap of part 1. In part 1, we essentially did a hard reset on your memoir draft. You took an intentional break, researched editors, and then went back into your draft with a very specific intention. What is a reader getting out of this? And finally, you named what you're writing, who you're writing for, and why they are going to care about it. Now we are taking that creative clarity that you have from your memoir's foundation, and we will apply it directly into your draft and revisions over the next 3 months. So month 4, we are going to get into story structure. This is often what writers are wanting to work on first when we start our work together. You want to dive into this part right away because that's the part that is really glaring to you. You're like, I know that this isn't working. I need to make it work. The reason it wasn't working is because you didn't have your foundation in place first. That's why in months 1 through 3, we built that. But because playing with your structure before you have that foundation and creative clarity will send you into a rewrite loop like that. And remember, this series is about moving like an author, and that's why every single thing that we're doing builds on the last step. Now that you are ready for story structure, you get to actually borrow from fiction writing techniques. I've done a lot of research into fiction to learn how to help my memoir writers. And you can use these different story structures like Save the Cat, the hero's journey. Again, there's lots of different ways to tell stories, lots of frameworks. You can use those as guardrails for your story. A square one, more than a strict template. As you're working with story structures and playing around with them, I want you to let these tools serve you and not have you contorting your story to serve the beat sheet. For example, I have a private client right now, and we spent our first several calls really trying to put her story into a story structure. And she had a specific one that she was trying to work with. And no matter what we did, no matter what, we're trying to pull out the midpoint, find these different inflection points for her story to make it fit the beat sheet. It was not working. And after a couple of calls, I said, hey, what if your story isn't going to fit this one? What if we try a different way of telling it? Then it was really easy for her to figure out how to actually tell it. And so now she's in the middle of doing some rewrites with a different story structure. So do not stay beholden to the framework, to the story structures. Use those as starting points. And, if your story fits into one, that's great. If not, we can play with different ones. Borrowing story structure techniques from fiction is very helpful in creative nonfiction like memoir, but we also get to be really flexible with it as well. So as you are figuring out your story structure, consider what your reader needs to know. I want you to factor in what their emotional arc needs to be in addition to what's actually happening externally in the plot. You are going to be using your structure to amplify what you did back in months 1 through 3. My memoir method, the methodology that I walk all my writers through, is actually divided into 3 different phases. Phase 1 is that foundational work where we identify what it is you're actually saying. That's what we did in that first quarter of the 12-month memoir series. Phase 2, which is what you're starting here in month 4, this is where you amplify that message. So you have to identify what it is you're actually saying, and then we get to play around with how to say it, how to amplify it. And that's what I want you to do here in month 4. Month 5, let's talk about revision. So now you have some structure to your story. This is when you actually get to dive into those revisions. If you have watched my free training, The Memoir Breakthrough, then you will know the difference between rewriting and revision. The link to that training is in the show notes if you haven't seen it yet. In short, though, revisions are different from rewrites because you know exactly what you're doing and how to expend your time and energy. It's not just looking at a chapter and saying, this doesn't work, I'm going to redo it. It's knowing why it doesn't work and what you need to revise in order to make it work. That is the difference. So as you are starting revisions now, pay attention on how you are writing your scenes. So scenes are moments in your memoir where the action is happening. Not every moment needs a scene, but you do want some solid scenes in chapters throughout the story to immerse the reader and help communicate the message in a sensory way. This is a way for your reader to get to know you. And that is really what we want to use our scenes very strategically. I want you to be using sensory details to bring your scenes to life. Here's an example. I will see writers say, I was so anxious. I was sitting in the doctor's office and I was so anxious. That has no sensory detail. If you look at the show, don't tell, that's very much you're telling the reader how you feel. I want you to show them how you feel. So I'm sitting in the doctor's office and my heart is racing so fast. When you are anxious, you are breathing really fast. Your heart is beating. You feel like you can't take a deep breath. Perhaps the fluorescent lights in the doctor's office are really stark and it feels really bright, unnecessarily bright. Sounds might sound louder. You might feel very sensorily overwhelmed. Those are ways that you describe anxiety. Like if I told you, my heart was beating so fast, I couldn't take a deep breath. I was feeling itchy all over. I couldn't sit still in my seat. I wanted them to just turn the lights off. There was a kid crying in the corner and it was so loud in my ears. That communicates anxiety. Even like I felt like I was waiting for 45 minutes, but it was only 15. Like you were shocked to look at the clock and see, oh my gosh, it's only been 15 minutes. That tells me so much more about your mental space, your emotional space to experience than you saying I'm anxious. Does that make sense? So communicate your emotions through how you experience them in your body, how you perceive the world around you and that moment. My clients get so sick of me saying this, but I'm always asking them, how did this feel in your body? I ask them that all the time because these are the experiences that will communicate the depth and emotion that you're looking for in your story. That's how you show. Is through these sensory experiences. Month 6, I want you to keep revising. So these months 5 and 6, this is where you really are going to be revising and spending your time in the actual work. Another question that my writers have in revisions is, do my chapters flow? For chapters that flow, you need to have a few pieces in place. And let me back up really quick because what I mean with chapters that flow, makes for an easy reading experience. And there's a saying that hard writing makes for easy reading. That is exactly what you're doing. And not that it has to be hard. Again, this process is meant to make your revisions really straightforward. But again, it is going to take some time and some intention to really get those revisions to lock in so that the reader's experience is what you want it to be. For chapters that flow, here's what you need. You need to have your finger on the pulse of your emotional arc, not just the plot. So we're not just going to say, this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened. What are the emotions that you are experiencing as a character and the emotions that your reader could be having as well? So we really want to make sure, okay, are we really leaning into the right emotional beats as well as the actual plot points? And then you also want to balance narrative, which is your scenes, with exposition, which is when you are telling something. If a memoir is too heavy in narrative, it will drag on and be really hard for your reader to stay invested. You will be wringing them out emotionally and they'll get kind of exhausted and maybe tap out. If your draft is too heavy in exposition, you risk boring the reader and having them zone out. So again, there is that balance between narrative and exposition. That's what you want to focus on to ensure that your chapters are flowing in a way that makes them very easy to read. What I just outlined in part 2 of this 12-month memoir series is exactly what we cover in phase 2 of my Memoir Method program. I built this methodology very intentionally, and I've built it over the course of several years of working with memoir writers, because I want you to learn how to write smarter, not harder. You're actually very good at writing harder. What I mean by that is that you're good at showing up. You're good at investing time and energy into your work. I want you to be able to make the most of your time and of your creative energy as you revise. And that is what the memoir method teaches. That's exactly why I've made these building blocks the way that I have. The reason you're here even listening to this podcast at all is that what you have been doing as a writer isn't working the way that you thought it would or should. And the memoir method is that different experience, that different framework that you are looking for. This is not a program where I hand over curriculum and then leave it for you to figure out yourself. I walk with you through each and every step. So what we just covered in today's episode, finding a good story structure, bringing scenes to life, chapters that flow, I will be helping you choose a story structure and then helping you with your outline so that you find the best narrative framework for your memoir. Again, I'm not just going to be teaching you these story structures. I will be helping you choose which one to implement and helping you make sure that your outline matches what you want it to, helping you know, okay, well, where do I deviate? Do I use the story structure? Where can I adjust it? This isn't just you having to figure it out. This is me teaching you and then helping you integrate and implement it. I will be editing chapters for you and helping you with your actual writing craft as you practice writing scenes and pulling in all the sensory details. Together, we will figure out how to make your chapters flow to find that balance of narrative and exposition. This is a very hands-on program, a hybrid of coursework, workshopping, and editing. And in addition to the coursework and homework, you can bring your questions to weekly coaching calls where I can talk with you live face-to-face, and we will refine your memoir together in real time. This is the work that I do with my clients. It's the magic behind the memoir method, both in one-on-one work and in a group setting like this. I will include the link for you in the show notes. I'm really looking forward to part 3 of this series because this is where we kind of head into much more of an author mindset. We really lean into that in part 3. So thank you for tuning in. I will see you in part 3.
You've just listened to an episode of the Memoir Method podcast. The Memoir Method podcast is presented by Charlotte Writes. If you liked what you heard, the best way to support the show is to subscribe through your preferred podcast player. And if you're feeling especially inspired, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Leaving a review really does help other readers and writers like yourself find the show. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on my website at charlottewrites.co or on Instagram at charlottejanewrites. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. And remember that you have a story that matters.